I can tell already that this topic was going to be a topic that would draw lots of people in, because talking about the code of practice that's come out and what that means for us as an industry is something that, yeah, we've probably all got to get our heads around. So it's lovely to have everyone here. And I'd really encourage everyone to feel free to speak and come off mute. Sometimes when we've done our network meetings before, we would have a bit more of a presentation, and that would take a bit of time. But we purposely wanted this to be a discussion where everyone can come together and share their thoughts, vent their challenges, but also learn about the JCOP, because I know not everyone has read 140 pages of the document already. You'll be pleased to know that we have, so hopefully we can help you understand it if there's any clarity that you need from that. Stuart, did you want to start? Because I know we were going to do a few polls just to kind of get ahead. Are we ready to go into that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually what might be interesting is if people can raise their hand if you have seen, read, or aware of what the joint code of practice is, please. Why don't you just put your hand out so I can kind of have a look at.
Oh, it's good. It's counting the hands. That's actually quite helpful.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. 13.
So quite a few. So I'm going to share my screen, and this is a session really where it doesn't work if you guys aren't prepared to talk. So this is really trying to find out your thoughts on it. It's almost giving us a steer as to what to do next as well because of this, and also to learn from each other with regards to your thoughts, feelings, and whatnot. So let me share my screen, and when I share, Jen, I probably won't be able to admit other people, so I'm going to leave that to you if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Oh, here it is. All right, let me put that into a presentation. Can we see that?
Yep, it's all good. I can see it.
Just set my screen up so I can see faces as well, so please bear with. Okay, here we go. So I'm not sure if I told you, Jenny, that I was going to put this slide up initially.
Oh, yeah, no, I like this slide.
But I don't have a lot of better things to do at the weekend, so I put this together based on a few thoughts and how I've been seeing things over the last 14 months. Here we go. There we go. I'm just setting up all my screens here. Cool. All right. So I'm going to quickly run through this because I think it's important that we sort of get an understanding of where we're going. And some people may be aware, some people might not be aware, but we seem to be moving, I think, in the right direction, hence the arrow going to the right. So it's just a bit of a timestamp here of what's gone on over the last 14, 15 months. So some may be aware or not aware that back in April last year, the HSC finally issued their first notification of contravention for stress in the country, and that was to the East England Ambulance Service. They followed that up 6-7 months later with the same to University of Birmingham. So it's demonstrating that HSC, once they get to hear through colleagues that things aren't going the way they should be going in organisations from a stress point of view, they will investigate and they will issue warnings. There then was a case which is outside of the industry, but something we need to understand. It doesn't mean so it's industry specific, because that in March this year, a gentleman called Matthew Foxton Duffy won a case against the Jockey Club racecourse for £990,000 because they were not managing his stress. And therefore he left, took them to court, and he won. And for me, that sets a new sort of landmark case in case law. And also what it's also demonstrating is that employees are aware that their organisations aren't doing what they should be doing in terms of managing stress. Last month, the Joint Code of Practice came out from the Construction Leadership Council, which is what we're going to be talking about today, and that is moving us towards the industry being a prevention-led approach. And actually, the very next day, ISO released their draft revisions for 45,001. There's a few changes on there, but the one that I think is relevant here and for us is that they are going to be making psychosocial hazards to be recognised the same as physical hazards. So whenever it comes to things such as risk assessments or however you manage your physical hazards, you are going to need to do the same for your psychosocial hazards. And basically what I'm assuming we're going to see in the clause, or we're going to start to see coming out in court of law as well, is that organisations shall manage root cause of mental harm caused at work. So this is now, if we look at this last 14 months, if we continue on that trajectory, we're going to get to that stage pretty quickly. So obviously the idea is to try and do something about it now so we can get ahead of the game and we don't end up in the dock. So this is the joint code of practice. I've picked out 3 pieces of it, and then there's a few Slidos, a few interactions. Now, this is on page 4 or 5, I think, I can't remember, and I am going to read this. There's a lot there, but I am going to read it because I think it's very, very pertinent, and it really does set the scene as to how they and how we know what goes on in the industry. So the joint code of practice is deliberately practical. It exists to help leaders, clients, notice clients, and organisations in the construction sector to embed a prevention-led approach. It recognises a simple truth that's come through repeatedly in the evidence and consultation behind this work, that mental health harm is not an inevitable part of working in construction. It is not a problem to be managed solely through individual resilience or support after the fact. It is shaped upstream by earlier decisions and behaviours around how work is commissioned, designed, procured, planned, sequenced, and led. This is why the code focuses on the system, not the individual, and they've put that in bold. It looks at conditions that create psychosocial risk and the controls that reduce that risk at source: realistic programs, proper resourcing, reliable payment, predictable work, recovery time, workers' voice, respectful behaviour, and welfare designed with dignity in mind. In other words, the code asks the sector to apply the same discipline to mental health risks that it applies to physical safety risk, where we identify, assess, control, monitor, and improve continuously. That's a lot for me, and does basically, it's very, very clear as to where they feel we should be heading in terms of looking after mental health within construction and in any industry for that matter. They also mention the 5 hazard clusters. These are the 5 areas where they are recommending that we look at managing work patterns, operational demands, people factor and environment, financial issues, that's for you, Ryan, and support factors. Okay, I think we can recognise all of these areas within the industry are an issue. I wouldn't suggest there's anything there that's a surprise. There's probably more they could have added to that. And how do we look to manage that? They are suggesting that we look at upstream is the most effective. As it says down here, we're looking at changing the work and supporting the worker. We're looking at reducing harm, reducing the risk, and then look at eliminating the risk. And this basically is a hierarchy of controls, I would say, from substitution, engineering, and elimination upwards. Well, substitution upwards. So to be fair, there's nothing new there. We know how to manage risk because we've been doing risk assessments for decades. This is really looking at how we start to manage psychosocial risk using the hierarchy of controls. Any questions on that before I go on to the first poll?
I think the only thing I was just going to add, Stuart, as well, so the thing that I liked about the document was how it looked at responsibilities, like what was with the client, what was with the contractor as well, and the supply chain. So I'm hoping the way this would move this in a different direction is that dual responsibility, that we've all got a part to play rather than just pushing it all downstream to the last subcontractors. So that was the only other bit I would add that's really stood out to me.
Thanks.
But yeah, I don't think no one's got any questions at this point, Matt. I'm sure when you ask the first question, there might be some other points to add.
Hopefully this comes up. If you can scan your QR code, or if you've got a second screen, you can jump onto Slido, and that's the code. The question is, do you think Jacob will impact the construction industry? Honest answer, please. Realistically, what we're trying to find out here is how this has been received, but do you think it's any good? If it's not, that's something we can look to discuss. You don't have to sit on the fence. You don't have to be swayed by what I've just said. There have been some negative voices, shall we say, on social media about it. So feel free to speak your mind on this, but we've got 15, 16 votes, and we're getting a range, which is good. You can all see that, right?
It's all moving in real time. Yeah.
That's how it should work, but you never know.
It's working.
You never know with technology.
It's working as it should be.
So does anybody want to come off? Would anybody like to? Let me rephrase that in a more polite way. Would anybody like to come off mute or even in the chat with regards to why they felt that they've answered the way they've answered? Go ahead, Malcolm.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure the question. We'll probably need to be able to tick 2 or 3 of these. So I've ticked it exactly what the industry needs, because it is. I think the document's fabulous. When I look at what's been produced over the last 10, 15, 20 years, this is streets ahead of anything. So it's exactly what the industry needs. But my worry now is, our concern is, our challenge is, right, how are we going to, how's this going to come into effect, and will it really have an impact? It's interesting, that it's come through from a client involvement, because at the end of the day, we know they're the key people, they have the money. I've noticed there's some people on here for organisations who are obviously acting as clients. They're absolutely key. They need to drive this by ensuring that, whether it's on a framework, whether it's tendering, whatever, that they're saying to organisations, you want to come and work for us? What are you doing about this? And we will allow, enough scope within that tender for you to be able to implement this properly. So I think it's exactly what we need. Big challenge now to actually get it implemented, or in some way start to implement it.
Yeah, thanks for that. You've obviously somehow sneak previewed my next slide, but we'll certainly talk about bids and tenders, because I think you're right to bring it up at this early stage, because I personally think as well, not influencing the room, but I think that's a critical part of it being successful. Andrew.
Yeah, hi everyone. I kind of, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
cool. I kind of agree with some of the comments there, mate. I think it is a great document, and I'm a big fan of the hitting the problems upstream. I think the industry has tried to tackle the symptoms for too long without actually tackling the cause. So, and I think a lot of the causes are relatively obvious if you're in the industry. My big concern with this document, however, because one, I haven't seen an awful lot of discussion on it on LinkedIn. I have seen a few negative comments, but it does, this should have felt revolutionary. This should be really have the industry talking and putting this all over LinkedIn, and I've seen very little talk about it. And I think my biggest concern is because, and there's two. One is that because it's a code of practice, you might get some of the big tier one contractors buying into this, okay, and you might get a few clients, and it's good to see that, you know, the clients have got some responsibilities here as well, because I think it definitely needs to be client led. But once you start getting down to the tier two, tier three smaller contractors, you know, some of this is, you know, maybe doesn't cost money up front, but it still costs money to the business. There's time and stuff that needs to be invested in this. You know, there really needs to be a proper change in the law. I'd like to see this being integrated into CDM, for example, that, you know, there really is an onus on all parties in a construction project to manage and look after mental health. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand on it at the moment. I've also, and Jenny knows about this, you know, the Workers' Right Act still precludes us from doing a lot in the industry anyway. You know, the fear of disguised employees and the HMRC coming down when we sort of cross the line of offering too much support. You know, that really does put the frighteners up the legal teams of clients and construction, you know, contractors themselves. So yeah, I think it's a good start, but I think we can go further.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. Barbara?
Hello, everyone. I guess that for me is going back to the point of the negative publicity that this document have got. I mean, we have a choice to make. We sit on the fence and throw stones at this document, or actually get on and try to implement this. This is a Jacob, this is not gospel. And I guess that's what we need to do. And for example, what we have done on one of our projects, we have started to talk to a client, to our client, and translate some of the points of Jacob in sort of, for example, checklist and KPIs. We need to pilot this Jacob and trying to see how it can be implemented and then get feedback, because I think that, and you made a very good point, there's been a very, very loud silence about this document, apart from just people sort of slagging it off. It's not perfect, but if we keep on aiming at perfection, we'll never go anywhere. So I guess that whilst is it exactly what the industry needs? Perhaps not, but it's a very good starting point. And I think that we need to recognize that quite a bit of effort has gone into this. Yes, it's probably written for tier one contractors. Yes, it needs to be probably scaled down and make it relatable to the supply chain like us, to smaller jobs. But this is our job. On this call, there are a lot of professional and very clever people that can take this and make it real on our projects. So I guess for me is stop throwing stones and be negative about it and get on with it, because this is what we are paid for.
Yeah.
So, and I think that our community needs to start to share the good and the ugly about this. Like I said, it's not perfect, but we've suggested to one of our clients to create a pilot that obviously is not committal, but the view is that this pilot is going to be translated into, let's call it KPIs, let's call it measurables, that is going to be part of contracts. And this is why, going back to what Jenny was saying, is the fact they've identified where the client has got responsibilities, where contractors have got responsibilities, because this Jacob is almost written in crayons. So I think that yes, it is lengthy, but is not impossible. And the very good point is blending it with CDM. This is going to be the way forward.
Very well said, Barbara. Thanks. Yeah, we've had this discussion quite a lot, Stuart, haven't we? But people might say they're signing up to the Jacob, but how do they evidence that they actually are doing what the Jacob says? And part of that's got to come out through learning and understanding what good does look like in this space.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Melody. There's so much we can say with what you just said, Barbara. So thanks for your input. I'm hoping this will sort of obviously come out in the group discussion in the next 38 minutes. But I'm going to go to Melody because I'm always keen to listen to Melody's point of view, because it's always relevant.
Oh, thank you. That sounds nice. I did tick the help moderately button because it was long awaited, this JCOP for me. When it came out, the one thing that I thought, yes, it's a long document, is that it doesn't make it easy to comply. So there's there's no, it gives you a kind of how to, but the how to is, and yet actually the JCOP contains exactly what I've heard from contractor after contractor, which is, oh yes, I know that we need to do something about stress and psychosocial health, but we don't know how to. And the JCOP is how to. It's got lots of how to in it, which is almost exactly what they need. So I've spent the last 3 weeks now mapping across bits of the JCOP to ISO 45003 and where they fit with things.
Nice job.
So that we can look at, okay, where does this fit? And it fits perfectly with the ACT. It fits, plan, do, check, act, but it also fits into the beginning sections of, what would you do as an organization. There's a lot of movement around ISO 45003 in the industry, in the bigger players, I have to say, at the moment. So I think it could have a moderate impact there. Moderately, I think, because it'll be the larger players that put this into action. If they do, it will be the larger players that do that. So that means that the what is it, 60% of the industry that isn't a larger player or more will only benefit from working on larger projects or working with larger players at first. So I do think there's a bit of work to go through this and say, if I'm a smaller contractor, if I'm a one-man band with 1 or 2 guys working with me, what does this mean to me? What simple things can I put in place? For instance, one of the things about which I think is really important, if financial well-being is a big thing, and if you're in the bigger players, if you're a client contract, then yes, you have some ability to change the actual wages and the way that they're paid. But for a lot of people, it's about understanding, how do I budget? People are not taught that. How do I do that? Those kinds of things could be accessed by smaller people, smaller contractors. So I just think it'll help moderately.
Thank you. Thanks, Melody. Interesting. The 45,003 piece, again, that's something we might touch on. I'm not sure. I am very interested to hear what Mark has to say. No pressure, Mark.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Preston. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, it's a little bit distant, Mark, so just to make sure you're near the mic.
I've had to stop on my journey and I'm finding an attack from Canary Wharf.
Well, thanks for joining us and doing that.
I do agree this is moving everything in the right direction. And I have to support quite a lot what's in there. After all, it's been largely lifted from my action plan. But do I think this is going to have an impact on the industry as it stands? And I think probably not, sadly. And there are 2 causes for that. One is the very low-key launch and the lack of communication. And that in itself is massively preventative. 2 is that tier 1, I don't agree there's much of how to do in there. There is. But some of the stuff pool tables in welfare units, and I do agree with it. But for most SME sites and tight constrained sites, that has to be a different way, focused on the actual construct of welfare units, toilets, and things like that. And the biggest barrier is the lack of obligation.
Yeah.
And since this has come out, I've already reopened my discussions with the JCT about reflecting this now in the clauses. Whilst I haven't said no, they're clearly not going to say yes. And I've also had direct discussions, by email with Carl Waitman himself to see if he's going to amend the Barclays call-off contract, and the jury's out on that, I suspect.
Yeah.
Quite difficult
Yeah.
to deliver. There needs to be obligations. I've been speaking in the House of Lords a few weeks ago about how this can be delivered through legislation. And there's some hope that might happen. But, you know, whilst this is a JCOB, and we talk of joint, it was joint to a very limited extent. So the Federation of Master Builders aren't represented, none of the trade associations the FAS are represented, none of the professional organisations, the ROBA, OSCS, RCE, are represented. So, you know, this is preventative in its way, because we're asking people to embed these systems into procurement and contract, which is specifically called for, I think, on page 64. You know, if we're not communicating to surveyors and dispute resolvers, you know, how to. You know,
Mark, I'm struggling to hear you. I don't know if anyone else is. It's a little bit distant.
I'll do my best. I'm not quite sure what my speaker is. But if we don't communicate this properly to the people that are drafting contracts, then, you know, this is going to be very, very difficult to implement. It will come by accident over a prolonged period because of lack of awareness and lack of obligation. So, yes, I don't want to hold the conversation. Yes, I'm broadly in line with the recommendations because they follow those that I've made that's been in front of the CLC working party for over 6 months. But they haven't picked up the communication aspect. They haven't picked up making things better for women. They haven't picked up incorporating Gen Z. So there's still a long way to go. But I think one of the sort of saving grace is that on the very front cover, there's a little triangle that says first edition.
Yeah.
And I spoke to Sam Downey about this, and she's very clear that it is what it says on the tin, and that they will monitor and amend as needed. So yes, we can critique, and I will be doing that as the appears to be the designation that I've been given in some quarters as the industry disruptor, but not negatively. I think that it's responsible to support and critique at the same time, and I think that we can do that.
Yeah.
To ensure that, you know, all the things that have been said already this morning are not lost, and, you know, further improvements can be made. But, you know, if we really want this to happen, we have to create the obligation through contracts and through legislation. And we are, I think, hopefully we're making the first moves.
Thanks, Mark. Again, there's a lot I'm itching to get out, but obviously due to time, I think Paul Resner makes a great point in the chat around 45,001 and the change, hence the reason why I put it on the timeline and those changes, because they're aligned, and that will start to put the arm around the back, or, you know, hold people's arms or around the back to actually start to comply. Malcolm, I know you've chatted. I'm going to come back to you briefly because I've got other slides to get through.
I was just going to begin with that, Stuart. Very, very brief, because I know you want to move on. One area that people have talked about the comms and the launch, etc., etc. I haven't seen anything yet from SSIP. Yeah. So you've got Charles Construction Line, Achilles, everything. That's an area that we should be looking to get it into as well. That's it, Stuart. There you go. Nice and brief for you.
Cheers, fella. Next slide, please. There we go. Didn't want to work for me. It is now. Can we all see that?
Yep.
This is the word cloud, so feel free to say what you think. If the JCOB is in tenders and bids, which I think it will be, certainly 45,001 will be, who is responsible for a success, for its success in an organisation? Clients. Just on that one with clients, not procurement. Procurement and not procurement. Great. That's going to make for a good discussion. On that clients piece, that's an interesting one because some clients aren't in this industry. They might be asking to build on their land, but they might not be construction clients, and they may say this isn't our space. But that's a conversation that's a conversation I had with, she's not, I don't think she's here, Alana in Taylor Woodrow. You know, her comment was a lot of their clients are not in construction. So it's something we can obviously chat. A couple more
people.
Integrating
it with CDM, like Barbara was saying, is then that's their legal requirements of what they need to, their duties need to be. So if there's things like that can happen, then they haven't got a choice, which is help those people.
All right. Anybody wants to chime in as to, oh, we've already got a hand up. Go ahead, Barbara.
I guess that you chose the word success purposely.
Yes.
So success is one thing, compliance is another.
Yes.
So I guess that if this success is a joint code of practice, so the success will very much depend on everybody working on it, both setting the standards and complying with the standards. So I think the success, it needs to be sort of everybody's game. Compliance is something different, and I guess that as it stands at the moment, I would say that the heavier lift is still done by the employer, and in this case is going to be the contractor. But there is something that I wanted to say at the very beginning, and actually this is not something I can't take a credit for this idea. Somebody else taught me this. But the success of this Jacob, it will sort of rest on pragmatism. We cannot expect, and this is where a lot of the criticism comes from, we cannot expect construction to fix society. And I think that we need to some of the points that are raised by, financial well-being, elements that are outside the control of the work environment. We need to be pragmatic about this. We can't expect construction, which is probably one of the most broken industry that we can think of, to fix society. And I think that this, with the idealistic objective of fixing society, this is why we can't seem to get success anywhere. So I think it's being pragmatic and trying to concentrate on what we can influence or what we cannot make worse. This is where the success is going to lie.
So yes, I want to chime in on that myself if I'm allowed to, because I kind of sit on that fence. I sit on the side of work should be good for us, and work is something that helps society. You're right. I don't think we're asking any employer to fix society. There's a bigger picture to this. There certainly is, and then there's that ripple effect. Then you start looking at social value, and you start looking at, demands placed on social services in the NHS because people aren't well in work. And when you look at the Charlie Mayfield review, Keep Britain Working, and trying to keep people in work, this brings in obviously Jenny's piece with regards to occupational health. It's a huge conversation to be having, but you're right to bring it up. But it's kind of, when you start to look at the construction industry, and we're looking at that specifically, are we attracting those, because there's potentially a low bar to entry, and that's not a derogatory term. It's looking at, there's a low bar to entry. Is it attracting personalities and people in social areas, social background, where it doesn't help their mental health, versus should it affect its help its mental health? You'll look at other industries, and you'll need all sorts of, some of them you need to be privileged to be a part of. Doesn't mean to say they wouldn't have poor mental health or mental ill health within those industries at all, because of society as well. But yeah, there's an aspect there of, and I know Melody's mentioned this several times on calls I've been with her, which is work related and what's work relevant. And I think when we look at the word cloud there, again, there's everyone is looking at different areas with regards to what's compliance and what's success, and therefore, again, I think there's an element there of that's quite muddled thinking still. And again, I don't know if we need to look at what workplace well-being is versus what well-being is and what's happening in society as a whole. We certainly need to be conscious of what's happening outside of work, but then where's, coming back to Mark's point and the legal aspect, where's the responsibility and accountability of an organisation? And that's why I put up that case of Matthew, Fox and Duffy, because the judge said in the debrief, I guess, was that the long and short with that chap is that he put his hand up several times that work was too much. They just piled on his work, and he got to a situation where he contemplated driving his car into a tree, and therefore was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And the judge said that was because that happened outside of work, it doesn't matter. The work, his employer was responsible for that injury. So it's kind of getting, we're starting to see some sort of area here where, irrespective of what's happening outside of work, you still need to manage people's hazards and risks from a psychological point of view in work. So yeah, it's a great point, Barb, and I've gone around the houses with it, but yeah, it's a huge conversation. Paul,
I got another hand up.
Yes,
Yeah, I think it was a really good point you made there, Stuart, about other industries. I think it's really important to recognise that, because we do focus in on construction, so we work in pharmaceuticals. But if you look at dentistry, for example, behind construction, they're the second highest suicide rate. So to be a dentist, you're going to be one of the more kind of more qualified than most, than any other sector, than finance or anything. So to get into medical school and do that, so it doesn't follow any kind of normal pattern, really, does it? Because then you look at construction, you could rate that lower down here, but then you could say dentistry at the very top, above finance and everything else. But then they seem to be second worst. So the table is really muddled. So that in itself is a bit of a conundrum for us to try and figure out. So I don't think it follows a clear pattern. But I think also, just touching on I put a post on this about I think this document's fantastic. I think if we want to make people better and well and healthier and mentally better, this GCOP's brilliant. I think there's a lot of really good stuff in there that we can take away and use in our workplaces. But I think just from the employer liability perspective, of people talking about CDM and bring it in, I don't think you can really do that, because if it did go to court law, it's hard to quantify what, if I was feeling stressed at work, how much of that was due to AstraZeneca, or how much was it due to my wife or my son or my relationship or fine, so it's really interesting. I'm really enjoying actually delving into this topic. I think it's a really, really important. I think it's just for the UK generally, and also if you look out with the UK, other countries don't seem to have these issues that we're having. So if you look at some of the European continents, they don't have these high levels of suicide, stress, mental health. So there's just a lot of things to add into these equations, isn't there? Yeah, it's interesting.
So just on that, so what was my thought when you were talking? There was a thought there from a point of view of the legal aspect comes up quite a bit, doesn't it? And again, I don't know where I sit with that from a moral point of view. We do it because it's legal. I mean, it's the stick versus the carrot. And then generally when you do things from a legal point of view, is it just to be compliant, as I think Barbara said earlier? And actually, is that a good enough standard? Actually, if you look at HSE, if you look at law, it probably, if we complied to the law from a psychosocial point of view, would be I assume would be in a far better place. The fact that the HSE hasn't really followed through yet, still with flexing their muscle at looking at psychosocial risks the same as physical risks, means we are where we are. There was another point which I've forgotten, but I'll look to, if I remember, Paul, I'll come back to it. But I'm going to move on to Melody.
Sorry, yeah, me with my head on about from a legal perspective, what we need to look at is simplified. We have always had the legal need to assess risks in business.
You're right.
And to excess pressure in the job is a risk that we have to risk assess, and always has been, and hence why since the year 2000 we've had the management standards from the HSE, because that's what we need to assess. So we're not starting off by assessing the person and their psychosocial. I think that's why in my head the kind of term psychosocial has brought a little bit of wavering in with it. We're not looking at the person and everything that has to do with them. We're saying, what is our risk to manage in our organization? How do we put pressure onto people, and how can we reduce that? And that is our legal duty, and it's clearly our legal duty. Beyond that, you're looking at people being what they're bringing into work with them. They may need reasonable adjustments in the same way that anyone else with any other kind of ill health or problem needs a reasonable adjustment in their work life. So there's a clear delineation, and I think we need to be absolutely clear that first part, that assessment of the risk, has always been our legal duty to do.
Absolutely. Thanks, Melody. What I'll say on that, just to add to that, is that I feel it's pretty much impossible to assess a psychosocial risk without consulting the person that is exposed to that hazard. Paul.
Yeah, almost.
Thanks for joining, Paul.
To your point, Melody. Lovely to see you again, Melody. The legislation has been there since the regulations were written back in the 90s, but the risk is still present now. And how many people have ever been prosecuted for failing to do a stress risk assessment? How many people have been off work with work-related stress? There's clearly an education piece. And going back to Jenny's petition, and you look at some other risks that we have duties to manage: vibration, cosh, lead, machinery, work equipment, DSE, lifting, manual handling, workplace facilities, all have their own specific legislation. Why doesn't stress?
It's purely, from my point of view, and I could be wrong, but it's purely the HSE haven't basically looked at it the same way, and it's a bit of a minefield for them, I think. And speaking to one or two people from the HSE recently, it still is, but they're getting some clarity. But yeah, because if it was, Paul, we would see a lot more than notifications of contravention. We would get fines. We would get people really being poured over the hot coals. To me, it's the only reason why I can't see why that hasn't, and that comes back to my point. If they'd have done that 20 years ago, we'd be in a far different place now, because the law is actually a reasonable. There's nothing in this JCOB which isn't against the law. It is not going against the law. It's literally saying follow the law. It's coming back to what Melody said. It's following the law with regards to managing a risk, and it says health and safety. And I've had this discussion in Scansco when I worked there, when they sort of didn't really want to deal with certain aspects. I would, with the health, safety and well-being leads, I would say to show me in the law where it says physical health and where it says mental health. It doesn't. So it includes health. And we're biopsychosocial beings. We cannot separate physical and mental health. So yeah, it's great points. Thanks, Paul. Lee?
Yeah, so I just want to come in really, because one of Barbara's comments sort of made me prompts me to put my hand up.
Did it make you shudder?
No. It was a reasonable adjustments concept, because if you think about, you know, the legality and litigation and injuries and accidents driving law, then driving the industries to sort of comply and catch up. So health and safety works at process safety, obviously that top decile, top performing in the UK and around the world really. But then you know, we're doing a lot of work with all sort of neurodivergence and mental health, and reasonable adjustments is obviously a very well used topic in that space, and that is bearing more fruit and focus because of legality and law and EDI and all that. So this is almost another wave of that industry and people's sort of lived experience changing the law with your new BS around the suicide in the workplace, ISO 45003, etc. So the vehicle, the JCOP, will be part of the vehicle to drive it towards future compliance. And I just find that if we follow the same principles, if you think in the future, we'll probably be the same place where process safety and operational safety is equivalent to mental health and the safety and the well-being and how the worker is, if you know what I mean. And I think by people getting, you know, case law and precedent and whatnot, more businesses are waking up to the risk. So there's an investment, unfortunately. You know, they have to weigh up whether it's what's the return on investment, because a lot of the time it's quite intangible. And again, it's hard to quantify whether it's in work or not, back to Paul's points before. But for the JCOP, I think it's a great foundation and a great set of principles that an organisation can adapt to prove in a court of law that they've done everything reasonable and practicable for the mindset of the person. But it's how we can sort of adapt that. I think as health and safety professionals and project professionals, you know, we think about the people. I think, you know, in the corporate commercial world, it's not widgets, it's people, isn't it? An investment. You can't see it's not equipment or PPE, so it's a harder sell. But unfortunately, that will come by data, more statistics, and more ill health and more court cases, really.
And it makes commercial sense for me. And what came out a couple of days, it was Mace Construct, wasn't it? I know we've got a couple of people on the call here from that, but they released that report with regards to if it's I might get this wrong, but if it's a project of 500 employees, they lose, is it two grand an hour in turnover because people don't stay in the jobs, and therefore you don't have that resource, and so therefore it's you know, I've prior to, I'm sorry, Jenny, you've heard this before, and maybe one or two other people, but prior to working in this industry, I worked in recruitment for almost 2 decades. And I interviewed over 10,000 candidates. And I would say 95% of them wanted to leave their place of employment, e.g. they weren't being made redundant or they weren't being headhunted by me. And the reason they're leaving is a psychosocial hazard that hasn't been managed. It wasn't a physical thing because I didn't recruit in those types of industries. And it's a huge burden on organisations, and it goes in the P&L under staff and employment. So your CFO or your financial director doesn't really get to see it. It's absorbed in the organisation. I haven't met a CFO or anyone who's responsible for the finance of an organisation that can tell me how much money they lose in sickness. So when that report came out from Mace Construction, there's nothing new there, but it's great that we're now starting to realistically think. You've got to keep people well to keep them in work, and if you've got to keep them well, then you've got to start looking. You've got to start looking at what's harming them in work. Anyway,
and if you look at the data of people losing lost time at work, you know, because of the stigma of speaking up and reporting stress, there's a hell of a lot more musculoskeletal ones. You know, that's why we've got a bad back one. It's probably a lot of people are saying, well, actually, I'm stressed, but
it is.
The CFO's looking at, is it an equipment fix, not a brain mental health fix?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm conscious of time. This is a great discussion, and thanks for contributing. Final slide for you to, I think it's a vote, can't remember. Come on, computer, there we go. Oh, it is a vote. Do you feel your organisation has to do anything differently to adhere to the code? Again, this is anonymous, so you won't be caught out if you're not. So if you can be truthful, that would be fantastic. Not that you wouldn't be, I'm just saying. I have been looking at some of the comments in the chat as well, so keep that going as well. That is great. And Stuart Wallace was on the call earlier. He's now jumped off, but he made a brilliant comment about this. A lot of this is about behaviours. It's a long way up, can't find it now. Which again starts to bring in the psychology. Oh, that's it. It's way back up at 1151. Part of this is about behaviour, and it is. And it's amazing how I find, and I get fascinated about how people go into a working environment and they change who they are and their behaviour. Ultimately, we're still human. It does make me think a lot as to the way people talk to each other in and outside of work because of the structure of work, the hierarchy, the mechanics, and how organisations behave. And I think something to do with their size and whatnot. I speak to Jenny the same way I speak to the referee when I'm watching my beloved football team. Would you believe? So yeah,
he's horrible to me.
Well, if the ref gets it right. But I think there's certainly something in that. Thanks for the vote. So do you feel your organisation has anything to do differently? There's that. Oh God! Wow! Whoa! I wasn't really expecting that. I really wasn't expecting that. What were your thoughts on that, Jenny?
Were you expecting to be more saying there were not too much?
No, we're already reaching the levels of the code.
Well, no one said that. Yeah. But I think that this is one of those things. I think there's always more that can be done, because it might be that they've got the right systems and processes in place to be looking at psychosocial risks, because we know that some are working to 45,003, but to really feel that you've done all you can to achieve that, I don't think anyone's ever going to be able to say, yep, we've done what we need to do, because there's always just so much more opportunity. And then there'll be like nuances. There'll be one project that can do it well and others that can't, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe
what were you thinking
naivety.
then? It was going to be more, you'd have people say, no, we know we're here, we know we're doing what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose maybe that's my naivety. I suppose my thought process is that there's nothing new in the joint code of practice, in my mind. It's so we should have already, the industry should almost already been doing that. Clearly, we're not. That's why they've released it. But I thought there'd be some players out there that would. Again, I know we've got a captive audience, and there's only a handful of clients, a handful of construction companies on the call, but all the same, yeah. Thanks for your comment, Ryan. We'll see in the quote in the we'll see you next season. That's a rivalry. Has anybody else got any thoughts? Obviously, we've got 5 minutes left, but has anyone else got any thoughts on this result here, or on this poll? Go ahead, Daniel.
Hi everyone. Yeah, just to start off with some really great conversations there. Just some thoughts on a few bits that we've already discussed. I think if I look right back to the beginning with the HSE management standards, and I think right on the first slide, Stuart, there was a lot of what I would say are stressors there, and it looks like what we've done is we've been very good at brainstorming. We've thrown a lot of general stressors into a bucket, but what I haven't seen yet anywhere is kind of like profiling that, putting that into a risk matrix. And if we take it high level, that's why we should be dealing with risk. What are the main stressors? Now, arguably that needs to be done at organisation level, because it's going to differ.
Good point.
So, but talking, purely from, I suppose, an SME construction sector, I would say there was some interesting bits at the first bit there. There was something about predictive work, achievable programs, and timely payments. Now, they are probably massively client-led, and I would say at our level, they're probably the biggest indirect and direct stressors. I think it's hard sometimes, but we have to remember, especially in the construction industry, we're building it's a product we are delivering, and every product has a value. If that product is not a viable product, it doesn't happen. And it's a commercial industry that we work in. And I think, program is often so critical to that, and that's why it's probably squeezed the most commonly by clients. A couple of people made some really good points about being client-led, and I think we can't just push things to clients, because at the end of the day it's still got to be viable, as I say, but it will need a lot of input and buy-in at client level.
Yes.
When you come down the sort of hierarchy, maybe, you know, talking about big estates, big commercial clients, maybe there's going to be more buy-in there. If you're coming down the ladder a little bit, that's going to be a lot more difficult for smaller construction companies, I think. A little bit, I just thinking there's been a little bit on regulation there. My thoughts on that. The fact that I think we can have a forum here with a lot of really experienced, intelligent people and like-minded people, and we can question or discuss, you know, the legal standpoint. I think that just underscores the point that it is too woolly. If there had been a breach of law, which, having read the 2 notice of contraventions, is what the route they was going down, my question is, why was that not an improvement notice? Why was a notice of contravention issued? And I'm surmising, but my suspicion is that the HSE themselves are not 100% confident on the legal standpoint there, and they was a little bit apprehensive. In terms of sort of looping right back to the beginning with the client side, we look at, you know, in general health and safety terms, there's different avenues you look at, isn't there? And we've got moral, legal and financial. And I think when we relate that to what we're looking at now, moral, I think, is the easiest case, isn't it? I don't think there's anyone at any level that doesn't see the moral benefits. Financial, yeah, okay, we can put business cases across at our level. There's a lot we can do with case studies and showing the financial benefits there. But the legal bit, I think, is where if you're struggling on the other 2, that's the bit you hammer home on, and maybe that's the bit that could be enforced. Someone mentioned a really good point about why hasn't it got its own legislation? You know, that's a question to ask. And I think, Stuart, you made the point, you know, are we worried at our level that societal factors and our employees going to be made sort of almost scapegoats for societal factors? And that's why I think it's such a complex topic. It's so convoluted, and maybe that's why the legal standpoint isn't where we see it in other risks.
Daniel, thank you. That's a really good summary. And again, lots of questions there, which we could probably do another hour on, actually. But yeah, and you're right. And I asked those same questions of myself. The only thing I will mention, as a ray of hope, should we say, is that there is a part in the JCOB around clients not creating projects that are going to fail from the start. It's on page 90. Just a bit geeky for you, mate. It's on page 94, where it basically says, you know, this is going to roll downhill. You know, it goes downstream. And I had a conversation with somebody at Taylor Woodrow about this, because he was saying, what if the client's putting pressure on us? Because normally that's where the pressure is coming from. And my argument back is it's for you to push back upwards and say, look, you gave us this bid, or we won this piece of work because we're going to look after the welfare of our employees, and therefore that's what we're doing, and what you're asking us is unreasonable. Would you ask that of your own, you know, of your own team, and start to share the responsibility and the ownership of it. Well, listen, we're at 12:30, so thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
We could, as I say, probably go for another hour. If you feel there is some more in this, then feel free to let us know, and we can put on another session on like this. If you like this type of session, then also can you give us some feedback on that? Because normally we do have speakers that come in and do a piece, and then there's some chat afterwards. But if you like this sort of peer learning type discussion where we can take and share and not work in silos, and we share ideas and what have you, then please do let us know. Any final thoughts or words from you, Jenny?
No, just no, sorry for overrunning, but yeah, we'll continue the conversation. I think we'll try and fill some of the gap of the noise of no action or no visibility from CLC. We have been trying to speak to them to get them involved, so I'm going to try and keep pushing that and say, look, we're a nice bunch. We're not going to be heckling you from the sidelines. We'll just want to have a genuine conversation about what to do and how can we support. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
We'll be
you.
in touch. Take care. Cheers. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Jenny, you still there?